Hello and welcome to another episode of the Business of Business podcast. I'm your host, Roy. Of course, we are the podcast that brings you a wide variety of guests that can talk about a lot of diverse topics. And today is no exception. We are excited to have Ann Holm back with us. She has been a previous guest, but seemed like we had to wrap it up right in the middle of a great conversation. So she's been gracious enough to come back. She's been in the people development business since 1984. She is currently a professional certified coach specializing in executive and organizational development coaching. She is certified master practitioner of the Myers-Briggs Type Indicator and a world expert on how to use type effectively for personal and team development. She's also a skilled mental fitness coach. Just like physical fitness, you can deliberately build focus and resilience to help you reach your goals. The stronger your mental muscle, the more likely you are to hold on to your gains over time. She uses the positive intelligence, which is an up and coming framework to achieve mental resilience. Prior to coaching, she had 25 years of experience in applied brain science, and she also used this hands-on experience to help her clients understand how to stay focused, engaged, and energized given the demands of the 21st century workplace. And thanks a lot and welcome back to the show.
Yeah, glad to be here.
Yeah, so I'm excited. And actually, in the Centro, the positive intelligence, that is one thing that, we really want to touch on. I'll let you, kind of give a little introduction about how you
Mm.
found yourself here. But then, we're going to kind of frame this positive intelligence about the impending move from workers being home based to maybe having to go back to the office even for a limited amount of time, and the anxiety and everything that's wrapped around that. So anyway, tell us a
Yeah,
little bit about, how you found yourself here. This is such an interesting, uh, I guess, skill set and
yeah,
area to focus on.
yeah. It is. It's a very interesting study, and it's also one that I think is so critical given the times that we're in right now. It's always
Yeah.
important to know when we're getting in our own way, and that's effectively what lack of positive intelligence is
Yeah.
we get in our own way. We keep trying to use strategies to manage our world that simply aren't working. And we all have those. So, this positive intelligence that I want to talk about today is based on the work of Shirzad Chamine. And it is a best selling book that Shirzad published in 2013, and it has now evolved into a very useful coaching program. And I'm a certified practitioner of that program. But what I love about this is that it teaches mental flexibility, mental resilience, especially in the context of what we're going through right now, which is this ambiguous state of, are we going to work? Are we not going to work? What's it going to look like, et cetera? What are the risks, et cetera, et cetera? I mean, it's a long list of ambiguities, and it's putting people into a position where they're trying defensive sort of strategies that might actually be hard, getting themselves less than what they really need or want.
Yeah. Yeah, I know it feels like we've just gotten, kind of settled into this routine and now it's like
Yes.
time to change again. And realistically, the only constant in this world is change. And so I do
Yep.
realize that. But a lot of people have been at home, they've been kind of left to their own devices, managing themselves or their
Right.
workflow, not close to other people. And so now we're going to try, and maybe some of these behaviors been amplified during this period, but now we're going to try to maybe bring everybody back. So it's not only the anxiety of what's my new routine going to look like, but also, kind of the interaction and what are the risks, like you said, of actually going back to an office.
Yes, yes, that's exactly it. And so, um, I'll give a brief description of what the positive intelligence framework is,
Okay.
and then I will talk about how it sort of applies to what we're talking about here, what this return to work thing. So, basically, we have a tendency, everybody has a tendency to either judge ourselves, judge our circumstances or judge other individuals. So we spend a lot of time judging, and we fall into this particularly when we are in situations where we feel, we have negative emotion. We either feel unsafe, we feel unsure, etc. So we start doing that. We start saying, poor me, I'm in this particular situation, or I'm not going to be safe, or something like that. We might judge others. I wish that guy would just stop talking about it and just get back to work, because we have those guys as well.
Yeah.
We judge circumstances. Oh my gosh, is it ever going to feel normal again? So we get ourselves into these mindsets where we're constantly, judging. And then on top of that, we have these characters that Shirzad talks about that are called the saboteurs. So there's certain ways in which we try to cope with these situations, and it actually is counterproductive. We don't think it's counterproductive, but it actually is. So I'll give an example of what one of these characters might look like. So one of the saboteurs that Shirzad talks about is an avoider. So an avoider is an individual who is very uncomfortable around unpleasantness. So they might be the kind of person, if we put it in the context of the pandemic, might be the kind of person who would say, this is way overblown. People just need to get over it. Just stop talking about it. No, I don't want to hear this. I don't want to hear what the CDC has to say. It's this strategy that is being used to try to not have your equilibrium disturbed too much. All
Okay.
right.
Okay.
And I happen to be an avoider myself. So, I, the funny thing about being an avoider is that you think to yourself, well, what's wrong with wanting to keep things pleasant, right? What's wrong with trying to make sure just, it feels like it's actually a good thing to be that person,
Right.
but actually what it does is you're actually potentially avoiding very important information, or you're dismissing people who might have legitimate concerns. That's a tendency of an avoider. Okay. So now that person's coming back to work, and somebody might have a legitimate concern about, well, what are our protocols? And that individual might say, an avoider might say, well, you'll find out when you get here. We'll be fine. Right. Now, another person's strategy might be around trying to get at every single specific rule. Those people are known as sticklers. So they want to know, they might want to know all the protocols. They might become very upset if somebody walks past the hand sanitizer and doesn't use it, sees a mask drop down below the nose, something like that. They can become very, very, very agitated. So now imagine a stickler and an avoider have come back to work.
Oh
All
my
right.
gosh.
So
Yeah.
the anxieties are still high, the ambiguity is still high, and now you've got these two characters that are trying to share office space. The one guy going, just cool it, and the other
Yeah.
guy is going, I'll cool it when you use the hand sanitizer.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah. Now,
you
are
know.
these I was just something popped into my head about the stickler. I don't know if I'm gonna ask you if this is part of their trait though, is uh it's the guy that's like, okay, here's this protocol that we have. Maybe it's just using hand sanitizer.
Yeah.
But then it's like, well, okay, but what if the sun came up in the west tomorrow, or if the moon turned green, it's these people that they come up with every imaginable scenario to you're like, oh my gosh, let's just start in with what we're doing, and then we'll cross these other bridges if they ever
Okay.
materialize.
And that's interesting because it's not a stickler, but you brought up another variety of saboteur, which is the hypervigilant.
Okay.
So those are the guys who say, okay, everybody here at work has gotten vaccinated, right? We're all back. We've all had the vaccinations. And that person says, well, what about the B1X variant? How have we accounted for that? Right. And so you you're looking at this level of constant hypervigilance about the what if, what if the moon is green and the sun comes up in the west, that whole kind of a thing.
Yeah.
They want, everything is about getting the sureness of there being no possibility of something going wrong. The problem is that that's not reality for anybody.
Right.
If we were looking to prevent all possible disasters, we wouldn't get in a car. We wouldn't, we'd be careful. We'd have all our food pureed, because what if we choked on a whatever, but that's another version of coping with that stress, is this hypervigilance. So we've talked about three of them: the avoider, who tries to avoid anything that's going to disrupt their flow. We've talked about the stickler, the person who is really tight about protocols. We've talked about now the hypervigilant, the person who's worried about whether or not some sort of further curveball is going to put everybody at risk. So those are three, and there's six others.
Okay.
I'll just tell you who they are, just so we have
Okay.
a full list.
Yeah.
So we have the controller. This is the individual who tries to control themselves, control everybody, control the system. They're different than the stickler, because the stickler is looking at, are you following the protocol and the rules? The controller is trying to move the chess pieces. So they're the ones that are trying to seize control of everything, and are very, very anxious if they don't have it. So they feel like, if I don't control the situation's going to control me. That's their mindset. And they don't realize the dark side to that thinking.
Yeah.
All right. So that's another one, controller. The hyperachiever, these might be the individuals who are out to prove that they can work, harder, faster, and accomplish more than anybody else. And so they leave it a little bit of a debris path. They're the ones that are, shooting off emails at 1 a.m. and making everybody else feel guilty about not, engaging with that. So you've got that. You have I mentioned the hypervigilance. We have the restless person, and these are the guys that have a hard time just staying in one spot. So they might be the guys that say, I don't want to come back into the office. My plan was to go to Bora Bora, to office out of Bora Bora for the next several months, and then I was going to go to Croatia, and then and so trying to get them to say, okay, no, actually, you might be coming into the office a few days a week here. They might you might start to see this restlessness. And then imagine, by the way, the restless person engages with the controller, who says, oh no, you're not. You're coming in.
Right.
And so you get these kinds of behaviors. So, like, how many have I listed so far? 6 of them?
That is
Or
6, yes.
okay,
Yeah.
6. So the ones, what else have I? The hyperachiever, the controller, the avoider, the pleaser, an individual who is going out of their way to make sure everybody's happy at every moment. So
Yeah.
they're bending over backwards, and they're exhausting themselves trying to make sure everybody is happy. And their way of controlling that situation, that anxious situation, is by trying to um, serve to the point that they wear themselves out.
Right.
So,
Right.
so that's another individual. So now I've got 7 of those, right?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
The victim. The victim is another one. Now, the victim is the one who is just, this is awful, that's awful, the situation's never going to be the same.
Right.
We might come into the office, but it's going to be terrible. And I so this idea of there's no control here. We're just victims. We're just going to be, you know that's the way it's going to be.
Right.
So that's another character. So now, again, you imagine these guys interacting with each other. You've got the stickler, who comes and says, "Oh, you forgot the hand sanitizer," and the victim says, "Oh, I never get anything right." You know?
Right, right.
Right, 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 right. So, you get that going. Now, who am I forgetting in this lineup of characters? I've got the pleaser, I've got the victim, I've got the hyperachiever, I've got the hypervigilant, I've got the what else have I mentioned
Uh,
already?
the avoider
The avoider, the
and restless.
the restless. Now, why? There's just one that it's not coming to mind. I usually can rattle these off. Just a second. I'll
Uh,
just tell you what they are.
that's
It's
okay.
unbelievable. I have to look it up, but
No, that's fine.
let's see. So these are just guys that are getting in the way of us using our best thinking.
Yeah.
Okay, here we go. Which one? Oh, the hyper rational. Oh, yes, of course. So the hyper rational is the guy who says, follow the science. All you have to do is follow the science. And they don't think about some of the emotional underpinnings of what might be creating difficulties for other people.
Right.
So they might say, you just follow the science. Well, science actually changes. And if we only followed the science, we actually have been getting lots of mixed messages from science.
Yeah.
All you got to do is mask. Nope, no mask. Nope, science says no mask, no science says one mask, no science says two masks,
Yeah.
etc. So if you take that hyper rational stance of, oh, whatever, what we'll just follow the science, that's no guarantee either, but that's the strategy these individuals use. So imagine follow the science is interacting with the victim, or follow the science is interacting with the avoider. You can get these mixtures of personalities that are using their you're using maladaptive strategies, saboteurs, to try to create um, some sort of order in their own thinking.
Yeah. So
So
are we do we have an underlying predisposition to one of these, but maybe we switch between them in different situations? Or do we typically, if we're, let's just say if we're the pleaser
yep.
pretty much constantly?
I have That's an excellent question. We all have all of these inside of ourselves to a certain degree, and the situation will certainly uh, dictate what you might see. However, we also have usually two or three that repeat themselves more often. Okay. And on top of that, now, one of my colleagues and I actually did some research on whether somebody's personality type by way of the MBTI could actually predict what those saboteurs might look like. And for some personality types, they're pretty easy to predict. So, for somebody who, for instance, is an INTP, those individuals tend to lean towards hyper rational, but for some types you can't predict. But we usually have two or three of them that show up a lot. Mine is restless avoider, so I'm the kind of person who says, oh, it's going to be fine, and I'm going to Bora Bora, you know. So but it's annoying. It seems like, well, what's wrong with that? You're taking care of yourself. You really the dark side is that you are leaving a debris path behind you, and you'll still feel that restlessness no matter where you are.
So I guess that brings up kind of this situation. I wonder if employers have taken this into account, because uh, there's always the personality conflicts just when there's
Right.
work. And now we've kind of bring this extra element of things to worry about or to be hyper vigilant. It's not just,
Yep.
oh, you misspelled this word, or that, that Excel box should be, now we've thrown this. And people, I don't know, from what I've seen, people tend to be very emotional and be very, uh, whatever side they're leaning to, they're very uh, stringent on that. As like there's not too many people who are in the middle and trying to see the middle ground. So
Right.
I guess the question wrapped up in all that was, have as we see openings and things like that, do you think that employers have really taken that into account?
Very likely not, because the uh, these saboteurs often show up as sort of a dark side of being having a particular strength. So for instance, if you are somebody who is able to get things sort of lined up and working as a good unit, um, they they're often lauded for those other behaviors. And depending on pecking order, for instance, the hyper controlling boss doesn't it's not a dark it doesn't he doesn't think it's a dark side. This is how I keep this place running, right? And
Yeah. Yeah.
they don't realize even in themselves that that's actually creates a real downdraft
Yeah.
when you bring those characters into the room, because now you get somebody who, for instance, again, let's say an avoider, so he notices something has gone wrong, and he should go tell his boss, the
Yeah.
controller, what's going on. Well, if he feels like he's going to go in there and just get nailed, or he gets his own personal freedom restricted, like if he says, for instance, I noticed on this spreadsheet I made a mistake. And if he's going to go in and see the controller boss might say, well, that's it. Everything you do from here on out, you have to show me first. So
Yeah.
he might avoid even going in there because he might meet that,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So you're this is the kind of dynamics we see in a normal situation. You add the pandemic and you add the return to work, and now you have the possibility of really seeing a lot of these characters.
Yeah.
So that might beg the question then, okay, great, what do we do about this?
Right. Right.
Right. Yes. So the nice thing about the positive intelligence program is two things. It creates self-awareness around our own saboteurs and what the impact of those things really are. And then there's also a way of uh, teaching yourself how to have better self command of your thinking. So there's actually an 8-week program uh, that can be done, and I take clients through the 8-week boot camp, and then they learn how to settle their physiology down and recognize that the saboteur is in the room, and then they make other types of choices. The term is using your sage powers. That's the term that Shirzad uses, but it's this idea of, finding some empathy in the situation, taking a step back, seeing what's really going on, taking a non-judgmental approach to innovating for ideas, deciding, what's in alignment with either your values or the values of the company, and then deciding on action. So instead of battling these saboteurs, like, I'm not going to show him this spreadsheet because then he's going to tell me I have to talk to him every time I do a spreadsheet. You can check those guys at the door, and you can come together and say, okay, what went wrong here? I can understand why that went wrong. What do you think is going to be a good way to go about fixing this? And so you can start to co-create a solution
Right.
that's using a more positive trajectory than to start to battle these saboteurs. Because when the saboteurs are in the room, you just get more of the negative stuff, and you get farther and farther apart. And so when you see the toxic office, a lot of times it's these saboteurs that are doing battle there.
Yeah.
So
And I was just going to say, I guess there has to be some respect about, uh, no matter our position, is that you feel a certain way based on your beliefs and how you interpret data. I
right.
feel the way I do, but uh, the I look at this as politics and religion as well. The effort and the turmoil for me to try to come out and convince you that you're wrong, I'm
Right.
right. You need to think like I do, get on board with this. I mean, and I know it's hard because we want everybody to we think our thinking is the norm, and how can
Yes.
anybody else think differently? But in
Yep.
reality, we have to embrace that and say, you know what, you feel the way you do because of this, and then try to somehow, I know we can't go so far that it becomes detrimental, but at some way we have to kind of adjust to be able to let people have those feelings.
Yeah, it's so essential. And honestly, when people so when they do the positive intelligence program, they really are practicing 15 minutes a day mindfulness. And we hear mindfulness a lot, and we think, oh gosh, we throw mindfulness on this and throw mindfulness on that. It's really about slowing down and thinking about what needs to be done in
Right.
this moment rather than thinking of all the things that went wrong in the past and all the things that could go wrong in the future, to
Right.
the point where we're so distracted by that. So imagine, for instance, a hypervigilant person coming back to work, and their only place their mind can go is what happens if the B12X
Right.
variant shows up here. And and now we're in this particular situation, and they can't bring themselves to, okay, this is what I need to do here. What are the protocols that I could follow so that I know I'm safe? And and co-create even as a team. All right, what are we going to do as a team? What are we going to follow through on as a team, so that everybody feels like they can do their work and not get sidetracked?
Yeah.
But it's a big challenge. It's a huge challenge, really.
Yeah, and I heard an old saying years ago that people would just try to challenge you on saying, "Well, that's just your perception." But I think the strong point is that our perception is our reality.
That is correct. That is correct. And when you battle it and you don't try to, meet with some sort of common thinking, or you don't realize that your own perspective is up for some degree of discussion,
Right.
you really can get more of these battles. So it's really, really helpful if an office can, at least if each individual can understand what their likely saboteur looks like,
Yeah.
and go from there. So
And we can, I think, too, I'm ask your opinion on this, is that we need to ask the questions why to understand, not to set up a point to have a battle on, because so many times it'll be like, well, I know that you feel this way, so can you tell me why you feel, I'm just trying to
right,
understand better why you feel that way. And then the
yep,
first thing out of your mouth, you're like, oh, well, that's so wrong. It's like,
yeah.
okay,
What's the point of
yeah,
that
yeah,
conversation?
yeah,
Right,
that
right.
exercise
Well,
was
that's what.
cool.
Yeah. Well, that's actually one of the real benefits to having an entire staff, or at least the leadership. If they even just go to positiveintelligence.com, they can actually take that assessment for free and find out what their flavor of saboteur looks like. That's the opening way to get at it. And then from there, if they think, okay, well, we want to improve that dynamic, then I can work with them, or another person who knows this system can work for them. But
Yeah,
right off the bat, if you just go there and you just get a feel for it. So if you say, "Okay, here I am. Oh, look at that. I'm an avoider," you can at least start to see. That's the first layer of self-awareness around the way we get in our own way, and how others we might bring out other sorts of saboteur behavior in other people as well.
yeah. That's the other question is, so do just take an avoider, for instance, do they have more conflict with maybe the controller, versus I'm just trying to versus somebody else on the spectrum that maybe they don't have, or as there just potential for everybody to have conflict?
I think it just um, you'll see various types of conflict unfold. So, um, in the past, I have done some workshops for people using the saboteur thing. And I do this thing called saboteur theater, where I have two volunteers come up and they pick out of a hat whatever those saboteurs are. So let's say you're going to have a victim and a controller, right? And then I give them a scenario, like they're sharing a hotel room. and then they're going to do like a little skit on what it would look like if a victim and a controller were sharing a hotel room. So, the one individual might do something like they swipe their key card, it doesn't work. Oh, that never works for me. And the controller elbows his way in and says, let me do it. And, on and on it goes. So you'll get that flavor, but you might get, let's say you get an avoider and a stickler, and they're trying to balance a checkbook, right? You'll just see a different flavor of conflict come out, you know, especially if people's mindset is falling into that negative. It can be fear, it can be lack of certainty. There's lots of different things that it can be irritability. There could be any kind of these negative emotions are the first sign you're going to bring the saboteur to the table.
Yeah, and I'm like, I feel like I'm that way to a point. It's that the the not knowing. If I know yes, if I know no
Yep.
appropriately and take the corrective action, it's just that place of limbo sometimes. But then we could kind of talk a little bit about the borrowing trouble. We talk about that with worrying, because you
Yeah.
can worry about a situation. And I'll throw myself under the bus. We had one here the other day that, I was thinking a lot about it, kept me up one night. And then guess what? It didn't even materialize. And I look back and think, what a waste of effort and time to even have given it a second thought. And I'm going to tell you, it's hard, but that's something I try to do, is like, okay, is this a
Yep.
reality yet? If it's not, then, we of course we don't want, there may not be any traffic on the interstate, but we still don't want to, sit in a chair out in the middle of
Right.
that. I mean, we have to
Well
use
put.
some common sense,
Yeah.
but but really is like, if we can't do anything about it, is it really worth giving it a lot of extra thought, for some
Yeah, and
things?
there's a lot of what I really love about this positive intelligence system is that there's a lot of strategies that you can teach yourself to uh, start to understand and do something else other than worry or whatever. So I love the idea of you don't put your chair on the interstate even when there's low traffic. It's really good. But but you do see people really, they can stay up all night worrying about something. And so maybe one of those techniques might be, well, what's the absolute worst case scenario, and can you deal with that worst case scenario, or what would be your strategy? That kind of a thing, as long as you're not playing it out as reality.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Right.
Though that takes a little bit of mental discipline and self-awareness to know you're even there, to even know that you're ruminating. For instance, if you lay awake at night and you're ruminating, you may not even think you're ruminating, you're just thinking about it. No, you're ruminating. So
Well, and sometimes we can, make it come true, because I guess the side effect of being up is then now you haven't slept and now you're cranky. So
yep.
even if that thing happens not to the extent you thought, your reaction is probably going to be way
Yes.
overblown and out, because you're just tired. You're tired and you've been thinking about this and how I'm going to react, and I'm not going to let that happen. And you're
Yep.
so ready to pounce. So
Yep. Yep.
just bad
Absolutely.
situation.
Yeah.
Well, Anne, thanks so much for taking time out of your day. It's always delightful to chat with you. It's always insightful. We always learn a lot of good stuff. So before we get some other information, what is a tool that you use in your daily life, tool or habit, something that really helps you?
I actually do a positive intelligence gym session every day, which means I learn to slow my mind down enough, or slow my thinking. It's not the right word. I wouldn't use the word slow. I learn to know that I can focus and command my mind, and I know when I'm falling off the rails, or
Yeah.
most of the time. But I have to
Right.
practice it.
Exactly.
So I do that.
Yeah.
That's one of my daily habits, is to practice that mindfulness, because it's actually very useful.
Okay. Awesome. Well, we will post the link
Okay.
in the show notes for the positive intelligence, but just tell us, how can they reach out
Mhm.
and do that. And then of course, what kind of clients do you work with? How can you
Uh-huh.
help them? Of course, where they can reach out and get a hold of you.
Mhm. Yeah, so I can be reached at my website is annholm.net, and I can be emailed at annholm@annholm.net, and there's actually a link to book a consultation. I offer free consultations. So if somebody, for instance, goes to Positive Intelligence and they do their positive intelligence assessment. That's free also. I'm happy to go over the results with them and just get them started thinking about what those results could mean and what it might look like in the work that they're doing. So I try to I try to take whatever they're learning about themselves and set it into the current situation that they find themselves. I'll do that. So
It's an important time for this, and I think we can put this on both the employers and the employee. As an
yep,
employer, you need to really be aware and be prepared for what to expect if you're bringing people back in the next few months. But then also, as the employee, you need to recognize who you are and where you're at.
yep.
So we have the, I guess, beneficial interaction with others, or we,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, yeah, I
All
agree
right.
with you. And I think that's the big challenge really as we go back
Yeah.
is, how are we going to manage this very ambiguous situation so that everybody can bring their best and most flexible self back to work with, and not, derail onto these saboteurs. So,
Yeah, and it's something I really challenge employers to think about, because until we talk pre-show, I really haven't even thought of this scenario. I mean, I just didn't, and so it is going to be a thing, and we
yep,
probably need to get out front of it so we know how to handle it in a positive manner for everybody.
that's correct.
Yeah. All right, Ann. Well, thanks so much. That's going to do it for another episode of the Business of Business podcast. I'm your host, Roy. Of course, you can find us at www.thebusinessofbusinesspodcast.com. We're on all the major social media platforms, as well as all the major podcast platforms: iTunes, Stitcher, Google, Spotify. If we're not on one that you use regularly, if you'll let me know, I'll be sure and get us added. So until next time, take care of yourself and take care of your business.